There are solutions. The work has started. I mean, I always remind you how long it took for the reform, for the Christian reform, and how hard it was and how bloody it was. Well, there has to be reform, and it has to come from within the faith. It has to come from people who are concerned about what is happening to our future generations in the West. We are no longer talking about Islam and the West. This is not Samuel Huntington's theory about a clash of civilization, my friends. This is a clash of ideologies within the world of Islam. There is no major clash of civilizations because Muslims have now been in the West for 3 generations. So they are Western Muslims. My children are not separate from what is happening. They have a Canadian identity, but they are Muslim. And they're not at odds with each other. Neither is my understanding of what it means to be a Canadian. And we uphold the freedoms that you have fought for so long. We uphold the democracy. We uphold the right of free speech, despite Geert Wilders and despite the hate propaganda. Look at what happened with the cartoons. More Muslims were killed in the streets in response to the cartoon debate. We are not defenders of the faith, and I say this, neither are we apologists. Well, I shouldn't say we. Let me retract. I am not a defender of the faith or an apologist for the faith. I don't have to sanitize my faith for the benefit of someone else. That is my personal choice. I choose to practice the spiritual path of Islam. And I will caution, though, that hate and bigotry doesn't help the cause. All it does is feed into that ideology of Islamophobia. So if you are concerned about the future of your country and the future of your generations, the work has to be done at many levels. You need to be like me and work 24/7. If you're interested, you have to empower your government to stop being so wishy-washy and allowing these hate mongers to make these speeches here. One of the things I said is that I can say this because I will never run for elections. I don't have to lie. We have to speak the truth, and we have to empower our politicians, and to a great extent we have been able to do this in Canada. There is no place for hate mongering, especially in places of education. Education is being sidelined in universities and schools because of these institutions. Yesterday, there were 2 women there from the Islamic Society of Southampton University. Was it Southampton University? And they said, well, you know, we call speakers. So I asked them, do you check the credentials of the speakers? Who are they and what are they going to say? If you're calling them and they're going to be involving themselves in hate speech against anyone, then you don't call them. We stopped Zakir Naik from coming to Canada because of the fact that he spouted hate. But here, everyone is welcome. And they come here and they use this to spout hate. How dare they? And you are the ones who have to say, how dare they? It's not my responsibility. I can only tell you the problems and the solutions, but you have to take it in your hands. But again, I always caution people, you know, don't invite me on your bandwagon of hate and bigotry, because violence only breeds more violence. And hate doesn't help the to solve the problem. It has to be done with understanding. It has to be done with some intelligent thought that this is not to slam all Muslims. My work is to encourage the 90% of the silent majority who are sitting on the fence to speak out, just as I am. And that is one of the hardest things that I have ever done. They're either terrified, because everybody can't live with death threats. They're either terrified or they're encouraged by their local leaders not to take part in this. But this is what has to happen. So the work has to be done from 2 sides. And what we have done in Canada is that we have traced the money. You know, that is the key component. None of this would survive. You have to cut off the oxygen that feeds these issues. So we track the money in Islamic organizations, in mosques. We have gone undercover into mosques and places of worship and community centers and into bookstores to see what kind of literature is being sold. So we sort of have become vigilantes in our own sense, and then we take the help of the government. But you have to understand, the irony is that the Islamists are more aware of their rights in these countries. So they use the very freedoms that they slam to actually promote their own agendas. You see, it's ironical. They hate the freedoms, but they use those same freedoms and the technology. You know, this cyber jihad is not taking place from a cave in Tora Bora anymore. It is happening on the internet and through Facebook and through Twitter. Someone told me that Osama bin Laden even has a Facebook page. How pathetic. But the fact is that, you know, it has become, it has gone technological, which of course is a big challenge for me. But the point is that these are the issues that we have to be aware of. And unless the community works together with the mainstream, the government, I won't say politicians, I have a lot of difficulty with them, with due respect to any politicians who may be here today, but I think that they are part of the problem. And the problem is that due to political correctness and because of votes, they give in. Now, Muslims are a huge demographic. They're a huge demographic in North America, and they're a huge demographic here. So what does that make them? That makes them a voting demographic. And when you have voters, you sell your soul for those votes. And I don't mean you, but the politicians do. We have been able to challenge the politicians who have been doing this. They will go into the same mosques where hate is being spouted against the country where they live, and they will vie for votes. And we've got them out. We've done some really subversive things, but we've had to.
And you get this, in my opinion, ludicrous situation where you have now an all-party parliamentary committee against Islamophobia. Now the thing is, it's headed up by two vastly left-wing, liberal as heck politicians, Simon Hughes and Chris Hopkins, one in fact a liberal and the other in fact a conservative. And then of course you've got Saeed Awarsi. See, to me, these are people who don't know nothing about Islam. They've never lived there. I mean, I lived in 8 Islamic countries over a 20-year period, and I studied at the university as well. I've been deep into the Quran, Hadith, and Sharia. And to me, it's an insult, to the intelligence of someone, and also very, very dangerous for the future of Islam relations with Christianity and the other faiths. To have people like that. So what do you do about this? Would you like to take our liberals and your liberals together and send them off somewhere? Well, I'd like to send them off to Belmont.
I can assure you that the problems in Canada were also by the liberals to begin with, because they opened their doors to everything. One of the other issues that is being discussed very avidly in Canada now, and I think you have to say, is multiculturalism and the understanding and implementation of multiculturalism. It has been totally understood to mean that you give extra accommodation to minority groups. That's not what multiculturalism was meant to be. Pierre Trudeau's vision of multiculturalism was the fact that there would be a balance. So essentially, if everyone can celebrate their celebrations, but you say, no, you can't say Merry Christmas, because that's going to offend the minorities, I think that's a bunch of hogwash, and I've said so. I've written articles for 10 years about the freedom of the Christians to celebrate Christmas and say Merry Christmas. They now call me the Merry Muslim. But the fact is that this is where it's gone off the track. And yes, you're absolutely right. Politicians are to blame, because you see, accommodation has to be across the board. It doesn't mean that you give everything to the minorities, but you take the majority's freedom of speech, you muzzle them because they're terrified to say anything. So you have to empower. It's in your hands. It's all about votes, my friend. You have to empower your politicians to make the right decisions. Yeah?